stay tuned because for the next 60 minutes, Motorsports Unlimited is on the air. Hi, I'm Jerry Bryant, and these are the lovely ladies of motorsports. And all this hour, we're going to have 60 minutes of action-packed excitement. All kinds of exciting things will happen. And we got the famous Bill Wildt, and we got all kinds of other good stuff that's happening all this hour. Motorsports Unlimited, 60 minutes of non-stop action. So let's go to the studio right now.
Thanks, Jerry. And hi, everybody. Welcome to the studio headquarters of Chicagoland's most watched, most talked about Access television series. I'm Bob Delia, and this is the 1195th edition of Motorsports Unlimited. Today, it's part 2 of our motorcycle road trip to visit the USS Silversides, a World War II submarine permanently anchored in Muskegon, Michigan. If you will recall last week, Bill left the Chicago area at about 6:30 in the morning, or the middle of the night as he called it.
Very quietly.
To travel from his home to Portage, Indiana, via 294 and 8094, where he hooked up with longtime friend of Motorsports Unlimited, Bruce Granzow.
Okay, supposed to be a huge gas station. I wonder if this could be it right off here. I'll bet this is it. He said Family something, and this says Family Express. I'll bet this is it. Pretty sure he said Family something. And I see a lone motorcycle on the other side. And a really tall guy, so that's got to be him. So he got another hour and a half sleep that I didn't get, of course. What are you fixing, Bruce? You're making me nervous. What are you fixing, Bruce? You're making me nervous.
I ain't fixing anything, just securing the luggage a little more.
Okay.
Good.
All right.
Together, they left Portage on Route 12, headed towards Muskegon, Michigan, avoiding the interstates all the way.
This particular section of helmet cam footage I selected from last week to bring you up to speed this week was taped after Bruce and I left Portage, Indiana on our way toward Muskegon, Michigan. As I explained last week, the entire adventure was Bruce Granzow's idea, including laying out the route, completely avoiding the interstates. He is totally familiar with the Indiana Dunes area, and I can't tell you how impressed I was with how scenic the secondary highway system in this area revealed itself to be. If you're looking for a pretty area in which to ride close to the Chicago area, this will surely please. Now, let's see if you remember what I asked you to do while watching last week. Come on, I went into great detail. What are you supposed to be doing?
En route, they stopped at Lookout Park just north of Shoreham.
Well, I've got to tell you, Bruce certainly did pick a great road, and it kind of underlines the things that I've said on so many of these motorcycle road trips. Get off the interstates.
After Lookout Park, they continued north, hugging the Lake Michigan shoreline and enjoying the beautiful scenery as they rode.
Did you remember what I asked? Okay, perhaps you didn't see the show last week, so I'll paraphrase. I pointed out we are not ABC, NBC, or CBS, nor do we have their nearly unlimited resources, so there are many things we can't do. It would be nice to have helicopter shots of Bruce and I meandering through the lovely countryside, or perhaps a camera crew in a car doing follow shots, and maybe another crew getting passing shots as we head for Muskegon. We don't have any of that stuff. It's just me with one little helmet cam. Now, while it would be nice to have those resources, and I'm not going to lie, I would love to have them, it's not impossible to capture the spirit of this adventure in another way. But You have to participate. You have to use your imagination. Oh, you don't have to, but you'll enjoy it a lot more if you do.
They stopped again in Sagatuck, Michigan to peek at an early steamship on display. Then they continued north to Muskegon in search of the USS Silversides.
You'll have a chance later in the program to try experiencing the motorcycle ride. Right now, it's time to further explore this very special place we found last week, and I don't want you to miss a moment of it. Enjoy. Great Lakes Naval Memorial and Museum.
It had been a great ride, rewarded with their first look at this beautiful and noble warship sitting majestically at rest. Bill began the visit by chatting with museum director Brian Hughes, learning there was much to see inside the museum before boarding the USS Silverside. Inside, Bill found a number of exhibits dedicated to telling the story of submarines in general, and the USS Silversides in particular. That's where we're going to pick up the story today. Let's join Bill and Museum Director Brian Hughes and continue where we left off last week.
We ran out of time as Museum Director Brian Hughes was showing Bill the gallery detailing the history of submarines. Hi, I'm May Chin. Let's try again.
We're now in another part of the museum. How would we best describe this?
Well, this is our one of the history galleries, and this particular exhibit here, Bill, traces the history of the development of submarines. And as I said, we're predominantly a submarine museum, so we've tried to highlight the history and point out some facts that most people aren't aware of. And one of the things that this timeline does, which I find quite interesting, is it shows that they've been thinking about and developing submarines since 1515. And that
1515, did you say?
Yeah, 1515, Leonardo da Vinci. And interestingly enough, the actual first submarine that was floated and successfully dove was in 1623 in the Thames River in London. Now, to give your audience some perspective, the first Thanksgiving in the United States was in 1621.
Yes, I'm just trying to, you know, it seems to me we're doing Jules Verne
right,
stuff here.
Right, exactly. 1621, we're eating turkey and trying to talk to the Indians, and they're diving subs in Thames River. And so obviously the advancement took place fairly rapidly after that. But it's like with periscopes, which is another one of our exhibits, and periscopes date themselves back to Johannes Gutenberg, the inventor of the printing press, who first invented a periscope in 1423. And now we have periscope packs that allow submarines to see for a mile around while fully submerged. So,
well, again, this is, as I said a few minutes ago, this is one of those places you just have to go in person because there's a ton to see, and all I can do is bring you a little taste. And part of that taste has got to be about this model we've got in front of us, the USS Silversides. As a former model builder many years ago, I can really appreciate the nice piece of work.
Thank you very much. We had volunteers who did this, and it's actually here being moved to another part of the museum, but we use it for in parades and things like that to show off the Silversides.
Okay, we're going to look at one more gallery in here, and then I promise you, we're going to get to that submarine, and also maybe we'll take a peek at that. What's the name of that ship you mentioned?
The McLean.
The McLean, because that one I didn't know about. So we're going to, for sure, we're going to see the Silversides.
Bill is eager to get to the Silversides, but Brian is persuasive and justifiably proud of the museum and its exhibits. Hi, I'm Rena Cairo. Let's check out one more gallery.
Okay, we've got something for the kids here, although it's not just for the kids. I shouldn't say it that way, but when you get to touch and feel and move and turn stuff, I always tend to think of that as something for the kids. Tell us what we've got behind us, Brian.
Well, we actually have the helm station from the nuclear-powered Silversides, which was commissioned after the Gato-class diesel-powered sub was decommissioned. And so we have the actual helm station here. We allow kids to get on and play on it and get a sense of what it would be like to drive a submarine. And then they can go out on our sub and do something similar to that. So,
and also kind of compare technology.
Exactly, compare technology. But one of the interesting things that a lot of people don't realize is that we started commissioning nuclear-powered subs as early as 1954. And so the Nautilus was launched around that time. And we had nuclear-powered subs that really had a lot of the same technology and feel very much like the Gato-class subs do, except they're just a little roomier.
Interesting enough, I'm 67 years old, and I do remember the hubbub. I was just a kid, of course, but back in the early 50s when they started talking about this, atomic stuff, this atomic submarine stuff and everything, very hush-hush, very top secret, very big deal. I remember it very well as a child. It was like Flash Gordon stuff to us,
yes,
and now it's commonplace.
Exactly, very much so. And Admiral Rickover, and we have an exhibit on him, basically was the father of nuclear submarines. And so, again, trying to help people understand the progression of the technology from the early 40s to where we are today, and we have some that show that.
All right, now, as you know, I'm eager to get to the Silversides.
Right.
Is there something else you just absolutely got to show the public that you've got inside here before we move on?
Maybe one thing.
One thing? Okay, I'm telling you, this guy's very persuasive. We're going to look at one more thing, and then we're going to get to the Silversides. Apparently, the first Silversides, I promise.
Bill was like a kid in a candy store. He is a technology enthusiast, and everything Brian showed him piqued his interest, and he wanted you to see just a bit.
Again, folks, the more you look, the more you see. And as I've looked around here, I could spend a lot of time here. We're not going to do it, but boy, could we. But look what we've got here. A technical, first of all, you need to understand, if you don't understand it already, all submarines are electric powered. The engines are only used to charge the batteries. And if you think about it, it makes sense because you can't have engines running in that when ships are trying to depth charge you. So they run silently on electric power. So the question is, what do the batteries look like? Brian, you're standing by one.
As a matter of fact, I am. And, they always talk about submarines run silent, run deep, and that's based on the fact that they did use electric motors when they were submerged. And they used the large diesel engines. There are 4 1,600 horsepower engines on the submarine to charge the batteries and store electrical power. But this is one of the batteries off of a Gato-class submarine, and each one of these batteries weighs 1,680 pounds, and as you can see, it's probably, 4 feet tall, at least, and there were 252 of these on a submarine.
252 at 1,600 pounds apiece?
1,680 pounds apiece,
That was probably 3/4 of the weight of the submarine.
Yeah, well, it was a lot of the weight, but it provided most of the ballast, obviously, as you can imagine. But when you think about that, one of the focuses that we have at the museum is to teach kids about the science and technology that was developed during World War II that has been used to pave the way for our technology today. And this exhibit behind me shows the development of battery power from the early batteries actually all the way back to the Baghdad battery, which was discovered in ancient Iraq, to lithium-ion batteries of today that put out nearly as much power as one of these would when it was fully charged. So,
as a matter of fact, if the audience is hearing some voices in the background, they have several interactive displays here where you push buttons and it plays little films, including a theater that's playing a film. What's the theater all about?
Well, we have a full-service theater here, and we play a movie every 26 minutes that basically traces the Pacific War campaign, and we use President Roosevelt's Day of Infamy speech as a backdrop for the video footage. It's very engaging and a great film for all ages, so it's something else that the kids and families can enjoy together.
Well, you talk about engaging. This entire place is engaging, and most engaging to me because this is Motorsports Unlimited, and I'm a technical guy. We are now, I promise, we're going to go out and take a look at the Silversides.
Not quite, Bill. As they were working their way toward the door to the Silversides, Brian pointed out something else Bill thought was important for you to know about.
Okay, I lied. Brian is a very persuasive fellow, and he's got something here that it really is quite interesting that you should know about. Brian, what did you keep me from the Silversides again for?
Well, the one thing I wanted to point out, Bill, is that when I talked about the science and technology of the past, we're also focused on the science and technology of the future. And one of our big emphases at the museum is education outreach. And this is a product of what we call our ROV in a Bucket program. And ROV stands for Remote Operated Vehicles. And like drones for the Air Force, remote operated vehicles are featuring very prominently in the future of underwater exploration for the Navy and for places like NOAA and all kinds of other applications. So what we do is we give kids a bucket of parts, and they don't know what those parts are, and they have to come up with build their own ROV, which is what they've done here. And then they get to take this ROV out on the submarine, drive it off the side of the submarine, learn about buoyancy and balance and displacement and propulsion, and then they get to go down on the real submarine and see how those same things apply in a real world setting. So we're very excited about this education outreach program. It allows us to teach kids about science and technology and engineering without them actually knowing they're being exposed to those kinds of things, which sometimes they aren't really excited about. So
guess what? I spotted something else I have to show the audience before we go outside. So, and now I understand that you've got a meeting and you're going to turn us over to somebody.
Yeah, I'm going to turn you over to Gary Reynolds, who's actually from Illinois and is one of our top tour guides here, and he's going to take you guys through the submarine. I just want to invite everybody to come to the Great Lakes Naval Memorial Museum, visit us, and you can visit us on the web at glnm.org.
Okay, I want you to say that one more time slowly.
Yeah, glnmm2ms.org.
Okay, and I can tell you, folks, because we did it, Bruce and I did it on motorcycles today, it's just about exactly 4 hours from Chicago, and you can easily do this in a day and well worth the trip. And the next little piece I'm going to do will give you just a little bite of an idea as to why it's worth it.
This one is Bill's fault. When he spotted it, he couldn't resist.
I just couldn't resist this when I saw it because when I was about 5 or 6 years old, my parents took me to the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, and one of the things that they had there was cutaways of torpedoes, and I was fascinated, first of all, at how complicated they were as far as, I'm not talking about the explosion part, I'm talking about the part about making the propellers turn, and they happen to be turbine engines, and I spent a good amount of time studying those things and seeing how they work. They were actually steam turbines, and seeing how they worked, and I was amazed at the simplicity and at the same time the complexity that they had, that kind of high quality everything in the construction of them. And it played a significant part in my life because years later, as many of you know, I spent 10 years of my life building the war bike, powered by 2 liquid fuel rocket engines, and a lot of that had to do with my interest in the, it's a little hard to explain. They're not rockets in that they're not thrust driven, but they're using the rocket thrust in order to drive the turbines. And the turbinic engines that I work with, including for the war bike, work on the same principle. And it was probably provoked by what I saw when I was 5 or 6 years old. So what I'm trying to say is, bring your kids to this kind of stuff. You never know when they look at this. They look at it with different eyes than you do, and you never know what's registering on them. These things are well worth bringing the kids.
Interesting. When Bill was a child, looking at a cross-section of a torpedo, he saw a fascinating drive system instead of a dangerous weapon. It was something that stayed with him and influenced his life. You never know. Now the USS Silversides.
Now we've got a replacement here for Brian, and you are?
Gary Reynolds.
And Gary, you're a tour director here, huh?
Yes, I'm one of the tour guides on the Silversides.
Okay, give us an idea. What do people need to know about the USS Silversides? And I assume we mean the first one, because I now know there's a nuclear Silverside.
Yeah, there was. That one is no longer around. It's been scrapped.
Hard to believe that the nuclear submarine is already at the point of being scrapped, but I guess
yes,
time marches on.
It does.
Okay,
it does.
This was a World War II sub. What do we need to know about this?
Well, the Silversides is the most successful World War II sub still afloat, or still around. It is the 3rd most successful of all time, meaning they're right there at the top all the way through.
How are we measuring that?
We measure by the number of vessels they sunk and by the amount of tonnage.
Okay, now, and how many years was this in action?
This the Silversides keel was laid in November of 1940. It was decommissioned in 1946.
Okay, so it saw the action throughout in the entire World War II?
Yeah, 14 patrols.
Okay, and how many ships did it sink?
It sank a total of 30, of which 23 were considered significant, because any vessel under 500 ton was not considered a significant vessel.
Really?
Yes.
Boy, I'd be significant if they were carrying something bad that was going to hurt us.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, and is there any other measurement that we look at as far as number of torpedoes they carry, armament, things like that? I noticed, for example, that this one still has the big deck gun, although I must tell you, I didn't realize the deck guns were that big. I imagined them more like the one up on the conning tower.
Well, what we have on here is we have a 20-millimeter machine gun up front in the bow. Behind that, we have a 40-millimeter anti-aircraft gun, and the deck gun is a 4-inch 50 caliber.
So that's a 4-inch gun?
4-inch. The shell's 4 inches in diameter.
That's a significant cannon.
Yes, it is. They could throw those shells out there a little over 9 miles.
Okay, and how many torpedoes did it carry?
They carried 24 torpedoes. They carried 16 in the forward torpedo room and 8 in the aft torpedo room.
Did this one take any hits?
They always took hits. They always took hits. After each patrol, they came in for a refit and repair.
Okay, what I'd like to do now is step up on the deck and take a little closer look. Is that all right with you?
Sure, that's wonderful.
Next thing we're going to do is step up on the deck. I do want to take a closer look at that 4-inch gun. That's pretty cool.
You don't think of a submarine as a platform for cannons, but the Silversides has a serious deck gun.
You know, Gary, we don't really think of submarines as being gun carriers. We think of them as torpedoing ships. But a 4-inch gun, that's more than capable of sinking a ship.
Yes, this is a 4-inch 50 caliber, and it can throw them out there about 9 miles.
9 miles?
9 miles, so it kicks them out there quite a ways.
So you really could take a ship out with this?
Yes, you could.
Does this submarine have any kills with the deck gun?
Their first one was killed with a deck gun.
Really?
One of their first vessels. It was on the 10th of May, 1942. They were only 10 days out on their first patrol.
Do we know if any of the crew people are still alive?
Last
I
I
think
heard,
1946 was the end. I was born in 43. It's possible.
it's possible, but I don't know of any of them that are at the moment.
We don't know for sure.
No.
Okay. Now, we're going to go from here, I hope, because the wind is really blowing here, we're going to go inside the sub and take a quick peek down there.
They decided to start at the front of the Silversides, the forward torpedo room.
We are now in the forward torpedo room, correct?
Correct.
Okay. First thing I notice here, we've got Bruce Granzow here with us today, as our audience is well aware, and there's no way in the world he could fit in this thing.
Well, he could. The tallest man that served on the Silversides was 6'4".
But was that common for submariners?
No.
Didn't they have a requirement at one time?
One time they did, but then because of needing men, they kind of eliminated that requirement.
Okay, and we found out the tall guys weren't that bright, so we could go ahead and send them to the deep.
A few thumps on the head, and they figured out how to get through.
They figured out how to get through the thing, because I can't imagine somebody, Bruce has got like size, I was watching Bruce go down the highway on his Harley, and I saw those size 13 sticking out, and I says, that's got to be killing his gas mileage. Just like a couple of sails out there, you know, so I can't imagine him struggling around down here. The bunks that we have on each side of us here, I can't imagine him being able to stretch out.
Well, you can't. The guys had to learn how to sleep on these bunks.
Yeah, okay. One thing I must say, I've been in the U-505 at the Museum of Science and Industry several times. This one's roomier.
Oh, much roomier.
Yeah.
We had the Silversides, we had a complement of 80 men.
That many?
And most of the German subs were 40 to 45 men. That was the average.
Okay, now I see the two submarine torpedo tubes here, and I see on the side we've got torpedoes here and here. Were all the torpedoes carried in this room?
Well, we carried 16 torpedoes
I mean,
here.
for the forward.
For the forward tubes, yeah, because we have 6 torpedo tubes up here.
So the guys were sleeping right next to the torpedoes.
And the torpedoes were covered with cosmoline, which is a grease.
Sure, the grease.
So you had to learn how to sleep, because if you rolled over, you felt cold, and then you realized you had grease on your arm.
Yeah, and plus the smell has got to be terrible.
Well, you get used to it. They called them pig boats.
Oh, is that right? Because of that?
They stunk.
Because they stunk? Okay. Well, anyway, I hope you're getting, you know what, folks, once again, all I can hope to do is to bring you a little taste of this. You've really got to come in person to really grasp and kind of get the feeling of what we call these guys heroes, including, and I'm going to embarrass him, he's standing right back there, but our own Bruce Granzow is a war hero. He was served in Vietnam, saw action in Vietnam. These guys truly are heroes, and the time I had the feeling was when I was in a B-25 bomber, and once you actually stand in there and look around and you realize how vulnerable those guys are, you talk about courage to be over Germany and have flak popping on the outside. These are brave, brave guys, and I hope we never forget it. And this gives people, I think, if they're here, a feel for it.
Oh, we want to invite people to come spend the night and sleep on the Silversides.
Can they do that?
Oh, yes. We have almost every night during the summer and then every weekend, all year long, we have people sleeping on the Silversides. Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, church groups, school groups.
How cool is that? That can, there again, to really give you a feel of the kind of sacrifices that these guys made. We owe them a lot. We all owe them a lot. And I hope we never forget. And I think places like this, including the submarine and the museum and the memorial, I think these kind of underline that we don't forget.
Next, Bill and Gary move aft to the main control room.
We are in the main control room, we can't show you very much of it because literally every nook and cranny is stuffed with gauges and levers and switches, and what you see around me is all 4 walls, just like that. It takes quite a few people to control the submarine.
Yes, it does. It takes quite a crew to operate the control.
I can see why you need 80 people now.
Yes, it tends to elaborate when you get in here and see what there is to do.
And this must be a very busy area because you can't see it from there, folks, but directly overhead is the conning tower, which I would assume, is that where the captain would spend his time?
That's where the captain would, or an executive officer. During battle mode, anywhere from 7 to 10 men were up in there.
That many up there in that little area?
And it's only an 8-foot by 15-foot room.
Wow, that's a tiny area for that.
And both your periscopes are in there.
And again, to sense this, to get a feel for this, you really have to come in person, because it is just hard to imagine, as I'm standing here right now, it is hard to imagine the close quarters of 80 people working frantically and somebody trying to kill you at the same time, dropping depth charges. It scares you just standing here.
Yes, it does. Just the thought of it, and everything that had to be done in order to make it operate properly.
Really, and to be placed in harm's way.
And these were very young men.
All of it, 18, 19, 20 years old.
18 to 22 was the average age. The old guys were 30 to 35.
A truly amazing generation. It's quite right when they say the greatest generation. It really is quite true. These people, not many people are ever called to that kind of a challenge, and they answered the bell. Amazing.
They did. We never want to forget what they did for our country.
Absolutely not. And that goes for, by the way, for all our veterans. It really is. But somehow the World War II people really stand out, because we were fighting an enemy. The outcome was not clear.
No, it wasn't.
And that does place you at great risk, you know?
Very much so.
Okay, what else have we got to see?
Well, we'll go through, we can see a little bit of the enlisted men's mess.
Okay.
We'll go through the crew quarters, which is where they slept, where the majority of them slept, and then we'll go into the engine room.
Okay, we're going to see the engine room too then.
Engine room.
Okay, we're going to move on down to the submarine.
Moving aft, they found themselves in what we might call the dining room.
Okay, we are in the crew mess.
This is the enlisted men's mess, yes.
Enlisted men means what?
These are, you had 8 officers and 72 enlisted men.
72 enlisted men, and how many people could you feed in here?
They fed 24 at a time.
They must have been feeding one to the other. There's no room for 24 people in here.
On each of the benches, there was room for 3 guys to sit.
Boy, that had to be tight.
It was tight.
That had to be tight.
When I have people come on for tours, I squeeze them all in to let them have that feel.
You know, they could give the RV people, the people that build the Winnebagos and all that, they could give them lessons on how to make things compact, right?
They most certainly could.
Okay, from here, we're going to go on to what's next?
We're going to walk through the crew quarters, and then we'll be in the engine room.
Okay, we're going
aft.
Aft. How about that? I'm a submariner. Aft.
On their way aft, they found Bruce testing the accommodations.
Well, he answered the challenge, folks. Bruce, how tall are you?
6'4".
6'4". How heavy?
About 245.
I challenged him to see if he could actually get up in this bunk. He was able to do it. He did break the bunk getting up here. His feet are in the chains. His head is in the chains. You would not have been a submariner.
Yeah, I would have. This boat's rather roomy. It's a lot roomier than you'd expect.
So you're comfy.
Yeah, I've been in beds that were shorter than this, and you'd think a submarine would have very little headroom. This has got much more headroom. The first time I was here, I figured I'd have to walk through here all hunched over. Not at all. It's much roomier than you'd think.
Well, actually, in that I will agree with it. I'm really surprised at the headroom here. Much different than the U-505 down at the Museum of Science and Industry. And once again, I really encourage you. You want to go come over here to Muskegon and have a look at this. It's a lot of things. It brings back a real appreciation for what the guys did, and also a little bit of an appreciation for the technology.
Speaking of technology, it was time for Bill's favorite part of the USS Silversides, the engine room.
Once again, we tease Bruce a lot because he is a big guy and the submarine show and all that, but I want to remind the audience that this entire show, if you're enjoying it, and I sure am, we want to thank Bruce Granzow. This is all his baby, and I want to remind the audience that I think the thing that provoked this was that some time ago, Bruce and I did a motorcycle road trip to the Grissom Aircraft Museum in Indiana, and he so enjoyed the whole process of how we did the show. He thought it up. He says, we should do that with a submarine. And that's how this whole thing came about. And boy, was he right. Now, we are now in the engine room. Tell us about the engines because once again, I want to remind the audience that when they were under attack, they weren't running with the engines on. They were running on electric power, and the engines were used to charge the batteries.
That's correct. What we have in here, this is the forward engine room, 2 Fairbanks Morris, 1,600 horsepower, diesel engines, made in Chicago, Illinois.
There you go. And did they run them both at the same time, or was one a spare for the other?
No, they normally would run all 4 engines to charge the batteries.
Really, all at once?
We have 4 of them, which are connected to generators.
That had to make a racket.
It did. It made a lot of noise.
And I understand you guys have a way of demonstrating it.
We do have that way of demonstrating it.
Fire it up a little bit, and we're going to bring it up a little at a time?
It's going to start suddenly.
Wow! It is hard to believe anybody could stand that for any length of time.
What you hear there is the sound of 1 at idle.
That's 1 at idle?
That's 1 at idle.
Can you crank it all the way up?
No, it's as loud
That's
as
all
it
you
goes.
got. One at idle.
Run it idle.
Well, I tell you one thing. I'm glad I wasn't a submariner. That's for sure.
The noise must have been unbearable. Next, they proceeded to the far aft end of the Silversides to conclude their look.
Well, we're in the aft torpedo room now. We've gone from one end of the sub to the other. Of course, there's several things that we didn't stop and look at because they were probably too small to get a camera shot. For example, right now the camera is in something called the maneuvering room, but it's only about 4 feet by 5 feet. We really can't get a camera shot of it, and that's where the submarine was maneuvered?
That's where the 2 full-time electricians stood who actually ran the boat.
Ran the boat. Now, we were talking about this as we were struggling to get through the ship, and one guy is bragging to the other guy, when I was young, I used to be able to get it through blah, blah, blah. You said the guys used to have races through the submarine.
I had a World War II vet tell me they used to have races, and the enlisted guys, some of them could do it in 20 seconds.
20 seconds. You know what I could do in 20 seconds? I could skin my shins so bad I'd have tears coming
They
down.
have some real stories to tell about injuries.
I'll bet they did. Once again, first of all, thank you so much, Gary. This has been an absolute pleasure. You obviously know your subject well, and apparently, I think, at least I'm sensing, you like your subject.
I love it, and it's an honor for me to be able to do it.
Boy, I'm glad you feel that way. First of all, I always like people that enjoy their work, and you obviously enjoy your work, and apparently you're a big supporter of this entire operation here, and I'm glad, otherwise we don't have these places.
Yes, I am. I think this museum is a marvelous place, and we never want to forget what took place in World War II, and this is part of history.
It really is, and it gives you a real sense of it, and the same goes for when we were down at the, Bruce Yell, help me, Grissom, am I saying it right?
Yes.
Grissom Air Base and the museums they've got down there. And you know what Bruce, I was just thinking about it when I was coming through the sub, and Bruce can't participate because he's stuck in another part of the submarine, but I want him to comment on it if he wants to. What made this tour and the same at the Grissom Air Force is the people. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. You couldn't ask for a better staff.
Yeah, it's the people. The people at Grissom, they believed in what they were doing there. They were proud of their facility. They were happy to show it off, and you guys seem the same way.
Yes, well, I was Air Force and Army, but now I'm doing the Navy, so we're spreading it around.
Okay, and I'll tell you what, they couldn't have a better guy here for this. So we're going to take one peek at that ship before we leave, but I've got to tell you, it doesn't make any difference if I spend 3 hours down here, folks. All I can do is bring you a small taste. This is only 4 hours from Chicago. Load up the kids. Be sure to bring the kids. It's really important that we pass this on to the next generation, isn't it?
It is. It's extremely important that the young people realize what really took place.
What really took place, and to never forget, that's for sure, because remember, if we don't learn from history, we are doomed to repeat it.
Bill and Gary climbed up the ladder to take a distant look at the McLean.
All right, we just want to give you a little taste of the ship that's behind us. This is also apparently part of the museum here. What have we got there?
What we have there is a pre-World War II era Coast Guard cutter. This is the McLean. There was 33 of them built. Calvin Coolidge authorized them to stop rum runners during Prohibition.
And my hope would be that they didn't stop them very well.
Well, they didn't. But we have it here. There's just a couple of them left around, and this vessel, the McLean, is credited with sinking a Japanese submarine off the coast of Alaska during the war.
Okay, I also noticed that in addition to the inside museum and all the displays and exhibits you have there and the technology that you're showing off, and of course the USS Silversides and of course the McLean, I understand there's also a sailboat.
Yes, we have this weekend. We have a sailboat that's in it. One of the tall ships is in for the weekend.
Okay, does that usually happen, or is that just an unusual occurrence?
That's a periodic thing. They come in and then they do tours and everything connected.
Do you know the hours of this place?
We normally are open year-round. We'll be closed for part of the winter this year, but our hours normally are from 10 in the morning till 5:30 at night during the summer. And other than that, it's usually 10 in the morning till 4:30.
How about weekends?
Weekends we're usually open.
Okay, guys, you've got the story now up here in Muskegon, about 4 hours from Chicago. Bruce and I have had just a great day up here, and it's time for us to get back on the road because, once again, I want to remind you, when it comes to a motorcycle road trip, it's not just the destination that's important, it's also the ride.
That's right, and they have quite a ride in front of them with plenty to think about on the way. Let's join them as they depart.
Oops, as I'm pulling away, I notice I forgot to properly clip the mic onto my jacket. That's it, in the cup holder, to the left, to the lower left of your picture. Now what? Stop and fix it, or let it go? We left the museum quickly because we realized it was getting late and we had a long ride in front of us and we wanted to do most of it in the daylight if at all possible, and I didn't really want to slow our progress to clip a mic on my jacket. Well, you know what? There might even be less wind noise there, I thought. Of course, I can't really hear the rattling the mic is picking up, so I'm thinking as long as I'm not going to narrate, this might be an even better spot for the mic anyway. I just thought I'd let it ride for a while and see if I like it better when I got the material back to the edit suite. I was tempted to reach for it when we stopped for traffic, but who knows? It might be a better spot. Still, it was bothering me. It looks like Bruce needs to check something on his bike. I think he wants me to pull over. I'll bet it's that darn GPS. I can see him looking at the screen just over his left handlebar, and it looks like he's concerned. Okay, good. That'll give me a chance to clip the mic on properly before we continue. I don't like trying something new without testing it first.
Fortunately, Bruce wanted to set his GPS before leaving, giving Bill a chance to properly attach his mic.
We're all right. We're all right? Yeah. Yep, it was the GPS. I teased Bruce about using it, but I must admit, it took us right to the Silversides without a single wrong turn. And stopping to check whatever it was he had to check gave me an opportunity to place the mic correctly. Boy, was I glad. When I got the material back for editing and heard the rattling the mic was making, boy, I'll just tell you, it's a good thing I didn't leave it in the cup holder. That would have been a disaster. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. Anyway, you might notice we're heading south, and the shadow being cast by Bruce and his bikes are long and on the east side, indicating it was getting late. I guess that's why I don't really care that much about a GPS unit. I've always had a good sense of direction. By knowing the sun sets in the west, it's easy to figure out we're heading south, and the long shadow on the east side makes it easy enough to deduce it's getting late. Not to mention, it's getting really cold. Of course, we wanted to get as much of the ride in the daylight as we could so we could see something. The ride on the way up was beautiful, and the trip back should be equally pretty. I'm losing confidence in Bruce's GPS. This doesn't seem quite right, and I know that he's questioning himself on how he's going. Yeah, maybe this is it. This looks more correct. Boy, it's really slippery on this sand. Wow. You can always tell when the guy who's leading isn't quite sure. It's the same thing when you're snowmobiling. Typically when the lead sled gets to a road crossing, he looks both ways, then continues. If he looks both ways again, you know you're lost. Bruce is looking a little tentative as I watch him look ahead, then back to the GPS screen, then right and left. I know he won't admit it if we're lost, just like I wouldn't admit to forgetting to clip the mic on my jacket. I don't know why we're like that, but we are. As soon as we're sure of where we're going, I want to talk a little bit about what we've seen at the Great Lakes Naval Memorial and Museum today and some of the thoughts it provoked. But first we have to make sure we're on the right track to return home. By the way, this is one of those times you have to use your imagination to enjoy the show. Right now, the wind is blowing hard off the lake and picking up sand particles as it does. We're kind of getting sandblasted as we ride. So if you want to experience this ride with us, you have to feel the sand particles peppering you. They actually kind of sting a little bit as we run along the lake trying to find the road that will take us home. Well, now it's looking right. I remember this now.
After finding their way out of Muskegon, they reversed the route they traveled in the morning. After a couple of hours of running along the eastern shore of Lake Michigan, Bill decided to turn the helmet cam back on so you could enjoy some of what they were experiencing.
When I put my nose to one side, it means I'm trying to get you from that side for a little bit. When I put my nose to the other side, just move over a little so I can get, because for editing I need it kind of from one side and then the other. So either that or stay in the middle of the lane and I can get there, you know what I mean? Of course, you can probably see why I stopped to start taping. Look at those colors. I mentioned when this day began and we were enjoying watching the daily battle of the sun rising and forcing life into all that it touched, it would eventually be victorious. Now, we're at the end of the day and the sun is losing its battle for control. But it doesn't leave without making a statement. It doesn't just drop out of sight without its arms of light and warmth frailing about, trying to find still one more way to prevail. The dark will come. The day is almost done. There is very little left. We know that. But one can't help but admire the sun's efforts not to go down without a fight. If you ride a motorcycle, you know all this. The days and nights don't just come and go without notice as they do when you're insulated from those things in a car. This is entertainment to bikers in a never-ending drama played out in one form or another every day. Watch as the sun dances in and out of the trees and obstructions. In a short time, it will be over, and the sameness of night will be upon us, bringing with it its own pleasures quite different from the energy of day. We've been riding for a couple of hours trying to cover as much distance in the daylight as possible, but I didn't want you to miss a bit of this day-end struggle between the sun and the stars. It's part of why we ride, and I'm trying to share it. Of course, I also want to talk a little bit about this very special place called the Great Lakes Naval Memorial and Museum and its star attraction, the USS Silversides. It turned out to be a joy in so many ways. As I've said before, when it comes to a motorcycle road trip, the destination is only part of the fun. The ride is equally important. I mentioned before about my friends Hot Dog and Doc Joe getting on their bikes and just riding with no destination in mind and not turning left until they got to Colorado. It was cool and we're all still talking about it. But for me, I need a destination. It sort of hedges my bet. If the weather turns bad and the ride is miserable, you still have a shot at a great time if the destination is cool. Although I must quickly add, a miserable ride on a motorcycle is still pretty cool. Anyway, when a destination proves itself to be as much pleasure as the ride as it did today, it just doesn't get any better than that. Experiencing the Silversides, by the way, is that a cool name or what, brings a whole range of emotions that I'm guessing are different for every generation. I mentioned, while in the heart of the Silversides, how brave those who manned her must have been, as all those who place themselves in harm's way have to be. I mentioned the reference we have all heard about the World War II generation being the greatest generation, and I couldn't help but wonder, while I looked around and felt the essence of the Silversides from deep inside her, if following generations really understood why the greatest generation reference. You see, almost everyone alive today has known the United States to be a superpower. We've been the baddest on the block for so long, I think it difficult for us to remember it wasn't always so. As a matter of fact, when the Silversides and her crew entered the fray, we were far from a superpower. In fact, we were terribly unprepared when World War II began. Our frontline fighter planes were wood and fabric construction aircraft thrown into the teeth of the German Me-109s and the Japanese all-metal Zeros. Our ships, the ones that survived Pearl Harbor, were nowhere near the match of those we asked our troops to fight. Everything from tanks to handguns were no match against those we were fighting. And yet, Americans answered the bell, and they did so in record numbers. There are many things we could argue about when it comes to the meaning of World War II, but no one can ever question the bravery of those who fought and won against sometimes overwhelming odds. It was the last time America would be involved in a conflict where the outcome was in question. Of course, any military conflict is potentially fatal and by its nature dangerous, and anyone who finds themselves in a position of taking up arms in defense of our country is entitled to our admiration and gratitude. But it was worse in World War II because the outcome was in doubt. Military conflicts since then have been dangerous and life-threatening, but we always knew if we wanted to pull out the nukes, the outcome wasn't in doubt. There were no nukes in World War II until the end of the war. Most experts agree the outcome of World War II could have easily gone the other way. I really don't know if young people today can imagine a time when America wasn't the premier military power in the world. That it wasn't just possible to lose a war, but probable. Yet, World War II Americans answered the bell. They climbed into weapons like the Silversides and set out to defeat a technically superior military force. Thus, they earned the title of Greatest Generation. I'm glad there's a Great Lakes Naval Memorial and Museum to remind people of just what that generation accomplished and hopefully in some way contribute to making sure we never find ourselves in a position of not being prepared militarily again. I don't know what anyone else sees when they look at something like the Silversides, but I see a representation of a generation who showed uncommon valor when their number was called, and a reminder to never find ourselves unprepared again. Now, I hope you're remembering how you're supposed to be enjoying this footage. Typically, when producers create a program about a motorcycle road trip, the focus is the destination or destinations, with little attention being given to the ride itself. Yet the ride is at least half the fun. But if you don't really try to get into it, it will just seem like endless footage of going down a road. If you'll recall, I asked you to try to imagine yourself as a passenger with me. Don't just stare blankly at the screen as the trees roll by, but really look and feel what's happening. When you see those now almost completely gone stabs of light and warmth finding a way to get through the trees and splash onto the road, try to feel what it might be like on the bike. Oh yes, you do feel them on a bike. Anyone who has ever ridden from a populated area into a forest preserve can attest to the fact that it's like riding into a refrigerator. Again, on a motorcycle, you are part of what you see. Try to sense what it must feel like. And don't forget about keeping an eye out for animals, particularly deer. Remember, the animal has a fair chance against a person on a bike. It's both the right thing to do to respect their space and share the land, and it's the safest thing to do. So, while you're thinking about what we've enjoyed today and watch the scenery go by, being ever mindful of those you share the planet with, don't forget to smile while you're doing it, because it doesn't get any better than this. Come on, let's see that smile while your imagination is working. You'll be surprised at the difference it makes.
Bill realized they were rapidly losing their light, and it was time to take a break and wrap things up.
Well, I guess the most important question I've got to ask, because this was all Bruce Granzow's idea. What do you think, Bruce? How did it go today?
I think it went great. It was a super trip.
Now, let me ask you, was part of your inspiration what we did with the Grissom Museum last year? Or was that this year? I don't even remember now.
No, that was last year, just about the same time last year. Part of it was the other part was that was such a great attraction up there, a piece of history that people can see. And I really thought we should get it on the air, is why I called you.
I'll tell you something, it really was an excellent idea, and I can't tell Bruce how much I appreciate his enthusiasm and interest on keeping his eye out for something like this. The wind is blowing really hard right now, and if you're wondering why I hesitated, it looked like I was going to dive for the camera. I get concerned. It's sitting there all by itself on the tripod. Now, a couple things real quick, because this is Motorsports Unlimited. I want to remind the audience that I'm riding a 1993 Suzuki GSX 1100G. That's a shaft drive high-performance touring bike, and a 1993. And Bruce, of course, has a brand new motorcycle. Tell them what you've got, Bruce.
2008 Harley Davidson.
Harley Davidson what?
A Wide Glide.
Wide Glide, and it's the anniversary model, right?
Yeah, the 105th anniversary model, yes.
Okay, I want to talk about something else. First of all, by the way, I think one of the things that made today's show was the right people at the museum. They were enthusiastic about their place. They were proud of their place. You could tell that they carried real joy and pleasure in what they were doing. And I thought we found the same thing at the Grissom Air Force Museum.
Exactly. They made us feel at home and went out of their way to accommodate us.
Well, yes, and it makes for a better show. You know, it really does.
Sure does.
And that I think, you know, once again, I keep talking about it because all my life I've been a gearhead and things that interest me were machinery. And as I've gotten older, I've learned it really all comes down to people.
It sure does, and they're super up there.
People really make a difference. It's a great place. You really ought to, you know, like I said before, take the kids up there. It's you never know what they might see or what might interest them that will spark something that they do later on in life. It's worth exposing them to those things, right?
Another thing, Bill always says he can only show you a small portion, and with this submarine, that is certainly true. It's worth a trip up there. So many little areas we couldn't get into because they were so cramped. We only saw maybe 10% of what you can see. It's worth the trip.
Absolutely, and I'm not kidding when I say those things, folks. All I'm trying to do is just give you a little appetite for it. You really do have to go in person. There's nothing I can do on TV that's going to duplicate what you can do in person. Now, one more thing I want to talk about, and we're pretty close to Benton Harbor now, right? We're almost home?
We're about 70 miles from my home.
Okay, so about 7, yeah, I know I've got much further to go because he did it again, as we've already explained. But he's not going to live this down. He did it to me again. I've been up since 4:45 this morning. It was pitch dark when we started.
And I've been hearing about that all day, too.
Yeah, and he was still asleep. I couldn't even get him on the phone after he asked me to call. You were too. Now, wait a minute. You want me to pull your cell phone out right now and call your wife?
Sure.
You know she'll back me up.
No, she won't.
Oh, yeah, he heard the thing ring. He said, that's just Bill, don't worry about it. Anyhow, one more thing I want to talk about, and this I want to talk about a little different way than I normally do. Mm-hmm. You know how I'm concerned I am. I don't want to influence people into riding motorcycles if they're not the right people to ride, because I don't want to have a guilty conscience if somebody hurts himself and all that. I think the audience is familiar, but I think my conscience is clear on out. So I want to talk about the other way right now. I was concerned when you bought your bike. I think you'll remember I was discouraging you.
Oh, yes, you did.
Yeah, because of my concern. I don't want my friends to get hurt. I really don't. And I feel sometimes, like I said, a bad example. So now that it's done, I watch. I'm so paternal about these things. It's terrible. It's because I'm older and because I've had so much time on bikes. I keep watching to see if he can handle it all right. I'm sorry. I do. I can't. I'm sorry. I can't help it. But he's doing fine. He rides just fine. Question. Now that you've done it over my objection and everything, are you getting real joy out of it?
Oh, you bet I am. Yeah, I've put 8,000 miles on this bike, and I'm just as eager to get on it every day as I was the previous day.
You know, one of the things that I've noticed is because I've gotten older, normally I've gotten, you know, I'm out with the boat and the snowmobile and all that. My snowmobile is sat for a couple of years now because of my back trouble, and the boat is sat for about 2.5 years now. I don't know whether to give up or not. I'm hoping I get better. I don't know what happens when you get to be 67. But I found that the one thing I can still do is ride the motorcycle, and it has brought me real joy. Some of the scenery that I've seen and some of the things that I visited, and I was thinking about you when we were riding along and I was watching you. I says, you know, he did the Grissom Museum thing with me, and now this thing. Now, by the way, you watched the Vintage Days thing. Sorry you missed that one, right?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry I missed it. I wish I had a little more advance notice and I'd have maybe made it.
You know how I am. And sorry you missed the Indy Mile.
Yeah, I forget what it was that day that I couldn't go on that trip.
You were just moping around. I got to have more notice. I got to have more notice. And with me, it's one of those, saddle up, we're going.
I know that's the way you are. It's not the way I am.
I know. Saddle up. We're going. Otherwise, nothing ever happens. But as I was watching it, I said to myself, I wonder if this guy really appreciates what he's getting out of this.
I'm enjoying it every time I get on it.
Okay, so this is bringing the joy and pleasure and all that. Because one of the things we're talking about, I'm 67 years, 62? 63. So we're not kids anymore, and usually it's pretty hard to stumble across something for the few lousy bucks that these things cost. It'll bring you the kind of pleasure that they do.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to spend a lot of money on vacations. It'd still be just a vacation, be over when you're done. This goes on and on and on.
Yes, it does.
Okay, I'm done. Anything else we want to tell the folks, or should we get home because we're losing our light?
I think we better head for home.
I think it's time, and once again, remember, he'll be home an hour and a half before me.
Bill won't let it go. And I'm guessing next time Bruce will have to ride to Bill's house first, even if they're headed east. Putting all that aside, it was a wonderful trip and something anyone could do in a day. Bill left at 6:30 in the morning and was home by 9:30 at night. What more could you ask for in a day? Beautiful scenery, a historic destination, and a way to honor those whom we all owe so much. Unfortunately, as always, we're out of time too soon, with only enough left to acknowledge the fine work of our award-winning production team, including Tom McGrady, Art Lawshout, our webmaster, Frank Barbalace, and Sue Casanda. Special thanks to JBTV's Jerry Bryant. Music is created for us by independent artists Roger Pauley and Jerry Herbert. Of course, we have to take a moment to thank the stars of this edition of Motorsports Unlimited: Samantha Bentley, Janine Lauschat, May Chin, Rena Cairo, and our host, Bill Wildt. Me, I'm Bob Delia, reminding you to check out the Great Lakes Naval Memorial and Museum website at glnmm.org. Let me repeat that: glnmm.org for more information about visiting this American treasure so close to Chicagoland. Oh, one more thing. Something Bill didn't realize: there is an hour difference between Chicago and Muskegon, Michigan. Make sure you take that into consideration and enjoy. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
This program made possible in part by support from Jimmy's Red Hots, located on Grand Avenue and Pulaski Road in Chicago.
This program made possible in part by support from J.C. Whitney & Company, located just off I-80 at the Utica exit in LaSalle, Illinois.
Motorsports Unlimited is produced by Bill Wildt, president of the Motorsport Advancement Crusade.
This program made possible in part by support from Bridgestone Firestone and your local Bridgestone Firestone tire retailers.
This program made possible in part by support from ABC Auto Parts, located on Ashland Avenue and 138th Street in Blue Island, Illinois.
This program made possible in part by support from Copy That, located in Carroll Stream, Illinois.
Motorsports Unlimited was created to raise public consciousness, understanding, and appreciation of the motorsport community and their activities. You can contact us by email at msutv.com, or you can write to Motorsport, P.O. Box 66242, Chicago, Illinois, 60666. We enjoy hearing from our audience. Please let us know what you think.
Of course, this is the Museum of Science and Industry at Chicago's lakefront, and here is a little longer shot showing the famous rock where motorsport enthusiasts gather every Thanksgiving morning to celebrate the anniversary of America's first auto race. Next week on Motorsports Unlimited, we're going to remind you Thanksgiving and this historically significant event are right around the corner. Check it out next week on Motorsports Unlimited.
So that's it, another edition of Motorsports Unlimited and the lovely ladies of motorsports. And be with us next week because we'll have something real exciting. Bill Wildt's going to have the lovely ladies, and just about anything can happen right here on Motorsports Unlimited. Every week at this time, we bring you the best in motorsports. So be seeing ya. Bye-bye, and keep on rocking.